a playlist original.
Of the Science Podcast with your girl, Anne with an E.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Root of the Science Podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. If you are new here, thank you for tuning in to another episode. It's always so great to have new listeners of the show. Remember that you can follow the show on social media platforms such as Twitter and Instagram at the Root of the Sci Pod, or join the Facebook group at the Root of the Science Podcast. Also, remember that you can subscribe on Spotify or Google Podcast or Apple Podcast so that you're notified when a new podcast comes on. Most importantly, there's a new exciting revelation. We've got a website, so make sure you check out the website www.rootofthesciencepodcast.com. Please support the show by clicking on the PayPal link in the description box. To all of my regulars, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. It's always so lovely to have you on. Now, let's get into today's episode. My guest today is Kim Ndlovu. Kim is originally from Zimbabwe, but she's currently now based in the United States. Currently, Kim is a PhD student in microbiology at Ohio State University. In this episode, she shares with us her journey to science that includes living in 4 countries. She then discusses her current research projects, the main one involving phage therapy. Kim shares in detail the importance of this work. Tune in as we hear about all of this and, of course, so much more. Hi, Kim. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Anne. How are you doing?
I am so great. I am so happy to finally be doing this,
Yay,
me too. It's been time coming.
It has.
It's been a long time coming. No, okay. So to get things started, please give us a brief introduction. Who is Kim? Where you currently based, where you're originally from, and just briefly, what do you do?
So I'm Kim. I'm 26 years old. I was born in Zimbabwe, but grew up both in Zimbabwe and South Africa, as well as spent some time in Botswana. I'm currently in the United States in Ohio, and I am pursuing a PhD in microbiology at Ohio State University.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've lived in 3 countries. 4. 3.
4, I guess. From here, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
4.
That's so cool. That's so cool. So you're like pretty well traveled. I love that. Do you think, having that ability of living in different countries sort of like shaped the person who you are right now?
Yeah.
You don't sound so convinced.
So. I mean, it's not something I ever thought about. Like, my growing up in 3 different countries shape who I am. It's not something I never thought about. But yeah, I think I got a little piece of something from each country that, I spent my childhood in. So yeah.
No,
to an extent, yeah.
That's really cool. I find it so interesting, being having that mixed heritage. It's something really cool and unique. And then I think sometimes it can be a superpower, and of course sometimes it can be like a bit I think overwhelming, maybe. I don't know if that's the word, but but it could be something like that. Okay, anyway, back to what you said. You said that you're currently in Ohio doing your PhD. Okay, but apart from you being Miss PhD, you have a life away from the science, right? You mentioned that you love to read, right? So if you had a book club, what would, remember how Oprah has that Oprah book club or whatever?
Yes.
Yeah. So what would your recommendations be, like off the top of your head currently?
Oh my gosh. I'm such a child. I revert back to the Percy Jackson series, Chronicles of Narnia,
Wow.
Mortal
Okay.
Instrument. I know it sounds so childish, but those are like my happy place. I've tried reading those, self-help heavy books, and it takes me months to read. I do recommend those as well, like Bell Hooks,
Yeah.
Toni Morrison. But my happy place is with the YA novels that we used to read growing up. Currently I'm reading this book is called The Children of Blood and Bone by oh gosh, I forgot her name, but she's a Nigerian author,
Okay.
and her book is so good. Like, she has 2 books right now. So yeah, I definitely stick with young adults. Something that would just, fiction that will take you out of this world, take you out of the stresses of the world. That's what I would recommend if I had a book club.
Yeah, no,
So
I love that. And I think you shouldn't feel like, like ashamed, because I used to think of a time when I really loved to read and it was fiction. Like, like it legit transports you into a whole nother,
exactly.
universe, and away from the problems of your PhD or
Exactly. And it's like, it's even better because it's like a TV in your head, and you're just like imagining things the way your mind wants you to imagine, instead of being fed by someone else's imagination. It's just perfect for me. I love it.
I love that. I love that. So what with those books, like you said, we read them when we were younger. So do you go back to them, or is it just
yes? I just bought the Chronicles of Narnia series like a few days ago.
Really?
Yes, I just bought the whole set. I've always wanted to have them. And then I just bought A Wrinkle in Time. I never read A Wrinkle in Time.
Oh, wow,
and it says 8-year-olds plus. I'm like, I want to read it. I've never read the books. I have the Mortal Instruments series. I bought those. Yes. And then of course I have the few, ones that make me feel like an adult, like Toni Morrison. Trying to make myself a cultured human being.
Yes.
But yeah.
To be like, listen, I'm still an adult. Look, I have books to prove it.
Yes, exactly. So I definitely got back to my childhood books a lot. Yeah.
I love that. And it's really cool that you're able to, transport yourself back to that happy place. And speaking of, transporting ourselves back to the beginning and your childhood, I think this gives us a great segue for us to then understand, Kim, so many years ago, right? The beginning.
Yeah, right.
What was the root of your science? Why science? Was it something that you always knew that this is what I want to do? Or was it where it was one of those things where like, oh, snap, I'm here. Okay, let's go with it.
Yeah, I think this is a story as old as time for most Africans.
Yeah.
You either a doctor or a lawyer or, so I always it's something that's been fed to me. I always wanted to be a medical doctor. And most of the people in my brothers and sisters, they're very science oriented. Like one of my I'm the youngest of 4 children on my mom's side. One of my older brothers is a chemical engineer. One of the other ones is a medical doctor, and then the other one is an EMT.
Wow.
So it's sort of something that's always been in the family. You just navigate towards science. So yeah, that's I feel like that was already laid out for me from the beginning. And of course, when I grew up and I was in high school, I did try, expanding my view and trying to see what other subjects I'm interested in. So I did accounting. And then there was this one time I read this novel about this real estate woman, and I was like, I want to get into real estate. I want to, let me do economics. And then one of my friends in high school was telling me about the economics class. I was like, yeah, that's definitely not for me. So I just reverted back to what I knew, which was science. I loved it. That was it for me. It's just always been a laid out path for me. And so, when I got to my A levels, I chose the science subjects, maths, biology, chemistry, and physics. And then that was it from there. So I don't know if that
yeah
that answers it. Yeah.
No, it does. And I like how you said that for you, because of your older siblings, it was quite it was only natural. It was what you saw. So that obviously played a very important impact. And the whole visible role models, and even this whole idea about being a real estate agent, it's because of something that you saw. It gave that ability, like, oh, maybe I could do that. Until of course economics showed you flames and you're like,
nah. I was like, no, yes. It was like, no,
I'm not going to do that. Okay, so Kim, take us through then deeper into your academic journey, right? And you finish with your A levels. What's next? Where to from there?
So I finished my A levels and I got a scholarship to come and study in the United States. So I went to a very small liberal arts college in a very small town in Missouri, Marshall, Missouri. And so what I like about the education that I got there, it was very, very well-rounded. So while I did major in biology and I got my bachelor's in biological sciences, I was still exposed or still required to take all, these humanities classes, this public, so it was a very well-rounded education. And I feel like that really prepared me for the PhD that I'm doing right now. So after I graduated in 2019 with a bachelor's in biological sciences, unfortunately I didn't walk because graduation was in May 2020. What was happening at that time.
Pandemic.
So yes. Yeah, I didn't get to walk. I didn't get to do that. So I just after graduation, I worked for a little bit and then I moved to Columbus to start my PhD in August of 2020. And so when I was applying for PhD, I knew that I wanted to do microbiology because I had taken one microbiology class at my undergrad and I really loved it. And I did do some sort of independent research on that. And I was like, okay, this is really something I see myself doing in the next level of my education. So I applied for PhDs in microbiology. I got accepted the offer to come to OSU, and I've been here since 2020, and I just joined my current lab a year ago.
Wow.
So yeah.
That's such an intriguing story. Something that you mentioned that was very different for me, somebody who's studying in, for example, I'm based in South Africa. You went straight from what do you call it, your bachelor's straight into a PhD, right?
Yep.
Where in other places somebody has to do a master's and then PhD. Right. So how does that work? Just out of curiosity, for somebody who is like, wait a minute.
Yeah, it's like, that's the question I always get, like, wait, did you already get your master's? I'm like, no, you can just go straight ahead. I'll be honest with you, that's a system I honestly still don't completely understand, but it's still done. It looks like that's something that they do here in the US. You can just go straight from your bachelor's and do a PhD, and it takes 5 to 7 years or however many years. But then but then the funny thing is that if you're someone who did a master's and you start a PhD, it will still take you the same amount of time if you moved schools. It's confusing. I know.
Wow, that is quite interesting. But I mean, if you say it takes 5 to 7 years, I suppose it kind of makes up for the master's.
Right, that's true.
Because given the fact that, okay, typically a research master's, for example, is like 2 years here, and then they give you 3 years, inverted commas, or however long it takes until you finish your PhD. So I mean, I suppose the time frame sort of works itself out, but it does. That's really, really interesting. That's really, really interesting in terms of, you know, how things are different. Okay, back to your PhD. You said that you are doing a PhD in microbiology, and you've just changed. I mean, you joined your lab last year, your lab that you're currently at, and you're doing you know, multiple projects or different projects with them. So would you mind sharing some of the stuff in terms of your research and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, sure. So I will preface this by saying that when I came to join like the PhD program, I was very like open-minded about what I could do. So I didn't come in with okay, I want to study biofilm formation in this certain bacterium and then that's it.
Yeah.
No, I was just like, just put me anything. If I can do proteins, if I can do bacteria, if I can do viruses, whatever. And so after rotations, in the first year for PhD, I chose the labs called the Sullivan Lab at Ohio State University. And I am doing multiple projects. So the main area of study with my lab is looking at ocean viruses. So viruses as in bacteriophages. So viruses of bacteria, that's the main project. At least that's the main idea of our lab. However, I came in, I was really interested in studying the human side of things. So my main dissertation project that I will be defending in a few years is phage therapy in spinal cord induced gut dysbiosis. Okay. I know it's a mouthful. It's a mouthful. I know.
All right, re-listening.
Let me break it down. Okay. So phage therapy is bacteriophage therapy. Is using the viruses of bacteria to treat infections, and that has been done. For example, people with cystic fibrosis. I've read a few papers. And with phage therapy, it's more of an experimental or compassionate use right now in the medical setting. It's not approved by the FDA. But, you know, with the advent of antibiotic resistance, scientists are trying to find new ways of treating or killing bacteria. And then we have these natural predators of bacteria that are called bacteriophages that can attack and kill those bacteria. And then the beautiful thing with that is that they can sometimes sort of co-evolve with the bacteria. So if the bacteria evolve to be more resistant to the phages can also evolve, you know, to attack the new resistance. That's the beauty of that. And so my project really wants to implement that in patients with spinal cord injury gut dysbiosis. So gut dysbiosis is an alteration of the gut microbiome. So we know that our gut has a lot of microbes that are very helpful, and it has a certain balance, you know, a certain abundance of certain microbes, and then different compositions and whatnot. And so with dysbiosis, there's an alteration or a change in that in the composition and structure of the gut microbe that sort of shifts it towards a diseased state. So it causes different symptoms like constipation, diarrhea. You know, it causes a lot of problems with that. And so what happens with patients with spinal cord injury, after they get a spinal cord injury, they sever connection between the gut and the brain. So the nerves that control the gut, the intestines are sort of broken, and that breaks homeostasis, right? And then that causes dysbiosis, that causes an imbalance of those microbes. So that's the big idea of the project. What I want to do is identify the microbes in spinal cord injury patients' gut that is causing them to be really sick, that is exacerbating the symptoms of spinal cord injury, as well as the symptoms of neurogenic bowel syndrome, which is what is a common comorbidity that spinal cord injury patients get. So it's to identify those certain bacteria and use phages against them to sort of kill them off. And so this will help alleviate the symptoms of gut dysbiosis in spinal cord injury patients. I hope I explained that perfectly. So that was the first project. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds so interesting and such important work that you're doing. So just pardon me before you continue. With these bacteria that you're able to identify, is the thought process then going to be like develop medications out of that? What is the like the big picture in an ideal world when everything works?
Yeah, I mean, the big picture is that we use the viruses of this bacteria to actually kill off those pathogenic bacteria in the gut. And the reason we do that is because we have like wherever a bacterial community resides, phages will always be there. So in our gut, we have a gut microbiota, but then we also have phages along with those. So it's a naturally occurring thing. Okay. So the assumption is that it's natural. It's not harmful to the human host. So that's the big picture idea. And of course, like there's so many things we have to think about in the scientific community before we even get to that stage.
Yeah.
Because we don't completely understand how the gut microbiome works, like the microbe to microbe interactions, the microbe to phage interactions, the microbe to host being us interactions. It's not something that we fully understand. And so of course there's efforts to first understand that, and then we can move on to implementing phage therapy in the gut.
Okay, no, I understand. Like you said, it's still a long way, but I mean, just the concept sounds absolutely brilliant, and I think it's really innovative work that you are doing. You have another project. Do you want to talk us through that one?
Yes. So the second project is very sort of bioinformatics heavy.
Okay.
So we are looking at how so using bioinformatics to identify if there's any viral like phages or bacterial taxa that modulate the risk of low birth weight in infants that are born to people living with HIV that are on ARV or antiretroviral therapy.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know how much I can talk about it because it's not something that we've started. So basically we're receiving samples from Congo, and we're receiving so many different types of samples. There's so many aspects to this project, but my goal really is using bioinformatics. So we're gonna extract DNA from these vaginal samples, vaginal swabs, and fecal matter, and sequence them. And so just do metagenomic analyses or multi-omics analyses on those to identify any bacteria that modulate the risk of low birth weight in those infants. So it's sort of something we're still working on. It's not a really fully formed project.
No, I understand.
At least for me, yeah.
Right,
so yeah, but that's one of my projects. I'm really excited about this one because I remember in my personal essay that I wrote, I was like, I really want to, learn and be able to help the African communities that I come from.
Yeah.
And so when they presented this project to me, it's like, we're going to be working with people from DRC. And I was like, yes, I want in totally. And so, so that's one of my other projects.
That's really cool. I like what you said about that you're able to identify sort of yourself. Well, in that yourself being your African identity. And I was actually having a side conversation with a friend of mine about how sometimes, when one does a PhD, when you're just doing it for the sake of doing it, there reaches a point where it kind of sucks your soul and then you don't know
Right.
why you're doing what you're doing. But I think
Yep.
if you're able to put yourself, like some part of yourself in it, it kind of makes it like, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Definitely.
You know? And I like how you've already, you know, you're already able to have that.
Right.
That
The
that
connection
aspect.
to home.
Yeah. Even if it's like you said, like even if it's the DRC and not like Zimbabwe or South Africa, but just the mere fact that it's Africa, I think that's going to make a vast difference in terms of, you know, getting yourself to that finish line, because it's going to have a bigger purpose than just, you know, just the PhD. Because sometimes when it's just a PhD, bruh, ooh, girl. Girl.
I feel that.
Yeah, so I mean, I really like that for you. Before you brought this up, I was actually thinking, right, your projects sound really interesting, but they sound very different. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So I'm like, how will you be able to do all of that, like, and keep your sanity? Like, have you thought about that? Like, they're very contrasting, or, you know, talk me through that. Like, have you thought about that, and if so, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'll obviously have the main project, which is the spinal cord injury project. That's going to be my main point of focus. This is a side project, and what that means for my PIs and my co-PIs is that they can put someone else in if they come in, right? So yeah, I mean, so far I've been doing fine with, but I'm actually working on another. I have 3 projects, but that one's almost wrapped up. I'm about to be like done with it.
Yeah,
it's worked out well, fine so far. I'm able to like divide up my time and focus on one project during the week and still maintain a personal life.
Okay.
You know? Another thing, like I have a really, really awesome postdoc working with me on the other side project. So I'm learning more from her as I go along. That will help as well with my main project. So really, while they're not really connected, they're both kind of contributing towards who I want to be when I'm done in 5 years, or what I want to have learned by that time. So yeah,
girl, all I can say is good luck. Like, I do not want to be you. I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
I mean, like you said, that you're not just doing it. What I like is that you're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. Like you said, even with this one, you are learning skills that are going to be useful for you in the future.
Right.
You know, and a part of me, my logical brain is like, okay, no, you've got 5 years to do this. So I'm just thinking, like, because like I said, in my head, the math was not mathing. I was like, how is she gonna do all of this? And then I was like, okay, no, maybe, you know, again, if we look at it in terms of people who do a master's and people who do a PhD, you know, you do a project for your master's that's a little bit different with some people to your PhD. So I think in my head, I'm making it make sense in that way. But I also understand what you said, that also that somebody could come in for that other side project.
And take over,
and take over. All right. So as we move along, you know, we spoke about the pandemic, you missing your grad and whatnot, but I mean, now the pandemic is slightly easing down, you know. So I wanted to ask you, you were of course in a foreign country, you know, and most international students were not able to, you know, come back home or etc. So how did you manage that time for you during that peak, you know, that season, and being away from home and all of that stuff?
So I tend to immerse myself in my work a lot. So during peak COVID, which was around February to May February to to June of 2020, I was working. So I had to work like, for a few months for a move here to make money for my move to a completely different state. So I immersed myself in my work. That's how I managed. And for me, because I was an essential worker at that time, for me, it's sort of still, I wasn't really in quarantine or sitting at home. I still had to go to work. So to me, it was sort of, it wasn't normal, but it was sort of, okay, I still have to, I'm still responsible for something. And then I came here, I started my PhD, then I was immersed in classes and rotations and reading. So it was sort of like I had to push through even if the pandemic was raging outside.
Yeah.
But I guess the one thing I really struggled with was the personal life sort of part at peak pandemic, because I moved to a new city, I moved to a new town, and you want to meet friends and you want to meet people that are going to be a support system during your PhD. I didn't do that until, like you said, it started easing down. I missed some of my closest friends just this year. So it's been like almost a year before I had like someone to support me emotionally and mentally that were in the same city as I was. So that was really the hard part as well.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But of course, I talk to my mother every day, keeping each other accountable, so that really helped, being able to talk to my mom every day. But yeah, that's more like how I managed, I feel.
No, I hear you. And what you said about how I think that's something you take for granted, that you moved to a new state or new area where you are now, and you couldn't interact with new people.
Right.
That's quite that's quite strange. But I'm glad.
I mean,
go ahead.
I mean, I had people in my class like that came with me in my cohort, so those were my friends for a while. But I also believe in making friends of people outside, ones that I work with. But I mean, I did have some support, but it wasn't what I have now, which is the best. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Kim, it's been so great you sharing your journey, the highs and the lows of how you got here. As we quickly wrap up, I wanted to ask, what is some piece of advice that you'd share with someone who's listening and is inspired by your story, be it in terms of the sciences or just also in terms of your the personal life as well?
I think I will say, don't let your research take over your life. Have clear boundaries, especially as someone in grad school, master's or a PhD. It's easier to set boundaries from the beginning than it is to take them away. So when you come in, set boundaries with people that you work with. Like, I don't work after 5 p.m. That was my boundary with everyone I work with. I don't work weekends. That's a good boundary. So for me, whatever stage you're in, set boundaries like from your work and put a boundary between your work and your personal life so they don't bleed together, because what I've noticed is that you get so consumed by work because it's so interesting so much, you forget how to live, you forget who you are outside of your work. So definitely take time to yourself, be selfish, be patient with yourself, be selfish of your time. Think of yourself, for you come first before your project. So
no, you've said something so important, and I love that, because I think sometimes with being a grad student, you always assume that like, this is it, this has to involve my life, and people get so lost in that, which is not a bad thing, because you're obviously passionate, but like you said, later on the burnout catches you, and it's so hard And it's so hard to not be like, okay, no, I can't do this.
Yeah. And you can't just recover from burnout and like I'm just gonna sleep today. No.
Yeah.
You have to take yourself along. It doesn't work like that. So
yeah, it doesn't. No, Kim, thank you so much for the wonderful advice, especially this part. I hope somebody takes that in, and also just coming on and sharing your story. I had such a lovely time chatting with you.
Yeah, I did too, Anne.
And to everybody else who's listening, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of the Root of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. Until next time, goodbye.